Oh, is it that time of year already? Okay, let's rank all of these yahoos. Previously, I've been ranking these infested hunks of metal based solely on their PB speedrunning genocide, and or whether or not they have transcended mortality itself. This year, however, I am going to pass judgment based on their holistic quality as a playable character, aka how much I like them. The rules are arbitrary, everything is as it has always been, and we are starting with Ash. I'm pretty sure that if I looked up the definition of a solid frame in a dictionary, I'd just get a picture of this guy's ugly mug. Considering that he's one of the OGs, it's remarkable that his kit remains not only viable but meta in some very specific circumstances, that being solo level cap, especially disruption. He also has invisibility done right. Granted, energy just falls into your lap nowadays, meaning you'll always have invisibility, but the duration is so short that you'll still need to manage it. So the only thing holding back Ash? The fact that his abilities are kind of boring. Go invisible, teleport to enemy, throw projectiles that strip armor, look at enemy and then deal true damage. It's not very engaging. I think I should have more of an issue with Atlas than I actually do, but well, I don't. Yes, he is a straightforward and generic one button to win character, but I mean, come on! It's at least a little bit fun to punchy smashy between the enemies, and also the synergy with Petrify and Landslide, there's something here. Don't get me wrong, however, this is nothing to aspire to, but I don't think this was a mistake per se. The golems suck though. What were you thinking? If I was solely ranking based on power level, I'd have some rather mean things to say about our girl here. But honestly, Banshee has the strongest damage buff in the game par none. With Resonance Augment, it gets to the point where all weapons deal hundreds of times more damage, and it even works with certain abilities like, Sarin Spores. I think having such an immensely powerful ability ought to come with a drawback, and her own fragility seems so fitting, doesn't it? In such a vast roster of character, is it not okay for some to only excel in a team environment? Well, I think so anyways. On the other hand, it sucks that her ultimate ability has the same combat application as a wet pool noodle, and in general too much of her power has been consolidated into one of her abilities, making her utterly one note. I really like Baruuk. I've often heard that he is a boring, knuckle-headed one-button machine, and I just don't agree with that at all. You have to regulate your restraint with lull, and that requires you to group up enemies, aka halting your attacks. You need to keep an eye on your daggers, and you need to armor strip with your very limited energy pool. If you're using Neramon, then you need to keep an eye on your melee damage buff. Baruuk is maybe a little bit too strong, yes. Does he really need a 95% damage reduction? Probably not, but he is an engaging character, making use of most of his kit, and he's just plain fun to play. It doesn't get much better than this. I've tried to be fair until this point, but I have nothing positive to say about Caliban. Spinny deal less damage than your weapons and move slower while locking you out of doing anything else. These abilities, they have no place in the game. Stop it. 3 useless summons that grant shield but not doing shield recharge delay. A good CC, but CCs needs to be either broken or bust because, Eximus units exist and they're not killing everything. The only good thing about Caliban is his armor strip puddle on the ground. Everything else kinda sucks. Nothing is welding together true, a weak mismatch of ideas. Okay, so hear me out here, right? First up, Chroma will always have a place as the profit taker. But if I'm being honest, I'm probably going to be wanking him a bit here. So again, if I have to be honest, he probably should be questionable, but I just can't do it to him. The idea of a character that gets more pissed when he takes damage, a force of nature, a sort of infested wrecking ball, it's so cool. I love the vision and he works fine in normal play, so yeah. I feel like I have to say that Citrine sucks. She doesn't have a place in the game, but man, I wish she did. The idea of a character that provides damage reduction as long as she is securing assists is perfect. Adding to her team with increased critical chance on weak spots and applying status all over the place, a support which helps her team without backpacking them and while still having something to do herself. Not the greatest support concept I've ever seen, but one I wish fitted into Warframe. The main thing setting her apart is being rewarded for dying and being left vulnerable afterward for a limited time. Grave's spirit suggests that she be played as a melee frame, but she works much better as a ability/caster frame. In a weird way, she's one of the frames which benefit the most from having support from her team, however she in turn offers very little. Furthermore, her kit boils down to spam 1, 2, 4, repeat. Fun at first, but it gets old real fast. Back in yonder day of Warframe's infancy, Ember occupied the role of map-wide nuke of lower content with a steep drop-off at higher levels. At that, she is no longer proficient. Instead, she was given tools to compete for the late game, but she cannot keep up with the juggernauts. Thusly, she ends up with no corner to call her own. I feel that the rework was solely reductive to her. I remember the pain of farming you. But it was well worth it. The night and day form are a fun gimmick and handled quite well. The day form can be used as a literal nuke, and the night form's rest is still good for leveling Warframes, if not the best anymore, still good. And night form also works as a safety blanket for your team, even if Styanics does it better now. But never mind all of that. Still a cool concept done quite well. Hack and slash and hack and slash and hack and slash and hack and slash and hack. And the augment is really good. Multiplicative for no discernible reason. I'll cut Excalibur some slack for being one of the OGs, but yeah, he still works and somehow manages to be unique. He has tons of damage but struggles slightly on the defensive side. He's not blowing my socks off, but I'm kinda entertained. Baruuk does it better though. I think you are all sleeping on Frost. He is the dedicated defense defender, creating a safe haven for your team, stunning every enemy that can be stunned and slowing the rest. Yes, he's only good in one niche, but that's more than most frames can say nowadays. Here we go, I'm about to go off. -1 ability which we will subsume over and never talk about again. Gara is the definition of peak design. She's a tank, bruiser and a support. In lower levels she's also a nuke, and at higher levels you better move it or lose it. She can also share her damage reduction with her teammates and very importantly, the defense objective. Speaking of which, the wall. Shatterstorm may also seem kind of useless until you realize that it's a fairly strong damage vulnerability, which we all know is pretty nice to perfectly understated. There is so much to love here. Okay, look, I know that I have made some claims in the past which is incongruent with what I'm about to say next. I don't think these things anymore. Let's not bring them up. Okay, great, thanks. I fucking love the walking STD. I've heard some truly disgusting takes. People unironically have been telling me for a year that you just built health tanking on Garuda. You know, the Warframe without any built-in defense? Oh, she can heal with blood altars. Okay, listen, shut the fuck up. This is what you do. Dread Mirror. Wait, hold on, I know. Let me explain. The augment is deceptively good. You don't have to kill the enemy with Dread Mirror, the enemy just have to die before the animation ends. And maybe now you can see where I'm going with it. This trick is somewhat difficult to pull off in a real mission, and I love that. You get to ignore all incoming damage, but only as long as you keep pulling off this difficult technique. Furthermore, Garuda is also a strong DPS, both solo and in a full team, but reversely can also be played as support if you don't have all of the in-game mods yet. She is a character who has a lot more going for her than I have been willing to give her credit for. I am personally not a fan, but I must respect the design of Gauss. His buffs are rather different from everything else in the game. The way kinetic plating and redline interacts demands that the player pays attention and alters their playstyle depending on the state of the battery. But it also offers a proportionately strong advantage in the form of an extended period of near immortality among other smaller buffs. He's also one of the few frames where all abilities are useful and synergizes with one another. The power of the character is nicely spread across the entire kit. Haha. Big ball, roll and eat enemy, armor strip. So Nerys is a really strong ability. It's also his subsume. Grendel is basically one big bag of gimmicks, and I think there is something to be learned here. If the gimmick is not applicable to the general mission of the game, killing hordes, the gimmick is not worthwhile. All of Gyre's abilities are just... When they all come together, the damage is pretty good, but in a real mission where enemies move around and don't line up perfectly, her damage is medicore, and that is being generous. She has a straight up bad pull and a bit of critical chance. She offers nothing to her team. She cannot even beat out most meta weapons in terms of damage, and also she has no defenses. She is the wet pool noodle. Ah yes, Harrow. I am not unaware of the paradox with his variable, where he, the support, have to get all the kills. Now this may seem like an idiosyncratic fuck-up of a non-insignificant proportion, and it's not that, but I also don't think it's that big of a deal. Personally, I prefer support abilities to have a prerequisite and in turn be more powerful instead of everything just being an aura. Maybe the problem lie with the things blowing up everything 3 tiles down and not Harrow. Just saying. Anyways, Harrow's entire kit is useful not only to himself but to his entire team as well. His ultimate switches back and forth between useful effects, and in many ways you have to think before using his second and third ability. Perfect. What is with this tiny pea shooter? What is with her best ability being a subsumable? What is with her losing shield gating as a unique mechanic and everyone getting it? Well, almost everyone. Okay, so there's not a lot of reasons to come back to this frame. They reworked this guy. Reworked being in massive air quotes. And, well, they changed one ability. At best, he's a 6 out of 10 frame. And you all know how much playtime 6 out of 10 frames get. If you're gonna half-ass it, why even bother? Enugh. I am going to provide as much value as is currently present within his kit. I like Ivara, conceptually. Actually playing her? No. So as a stealth frame, she fails hard. Her movement is more restricted than any other frame, and Wukong is a million times better as a spy frame. Does that mean she's weak? I mean, she's not that, but I have a video on how you can get use out of her. With that being said, however, she has some of the most campy gameplay. I am feeling generous putting her in questionable, if I'm being honest. Oh man, oh boy, I gotta get out of here. I'm never going to hear the end of this. Again, if we were talking power scaling specifically, it would be a different conversation. But you cannot look into my eyeballs with a straight face and tell me that it isn't at least slightly problematic that whipping the wall repeatedly for hours is the most effective way to get loot. The issue sure was alleviated slightly by the LOS changes to Khora and the Eximus changes as well, but it is still an exemplification. It still exemplifies the issue of fun versus efficiency. Do you want to be miserable doing this long as fuck process for a prolonged period of time, or do you want to be miserable doing it in the most unengaging way possible? Please choose. Man, this guy is so boring. Hit 3 and 1 to blow up the room, and then hit 2 to sustain yourself, and then repeat. It's not any different than any other nuke frame, but Kullervo, unfortunately for me, was released at a point where power fatigue was at an all-time high. My opinion at the time just basically boiled down to, okay, another one, neat. However, the way the nuke is achieved is perhaps to newer players less obvious, and I suppose there is nothing outrageously wrong with his kit, just did not managed to engage me whatsoever. Literally did not make a splash. What were you thinking, DE? The idea of a frame that uses cooldowns instead of energy is rather cool. However, it is in the execution that this concept comes apart. Ideally, your 4 abilities would come close to equal in power so that you may pace yourself and cycle between them. Consolidating all of Lavos' ability to kill into his 4th ability is actually the dumbest thing they ever did. Okay, that's not true, but it was amazingly stupid.
Limbo is broken in his own little special way, but the way in which you break him sucks because it's so unintuitive. I know that I'm not talking for everyone here, but I truly despise it when weapons, warframes and or abilities doesn't do what it says on the tin, or does something which is stated nowhere. Where is the part about the tornadoes transferring all damage and status effect dealt to the enemies trapped inside? Where? Where is it, D? Where is it stated that condition overload does not work on heavy attacks on throwable weapons? It is my least favorite part of the game, that you simply cannot trust any description. Limbo is only strong because of, come on, let's be honest, unintentional interactions. Not to mention the fact that a single jackass can hold the entire mission hostage when playing Limbo. I hope that makes up for me glaring over Limbo last year. I am sure all the 3 Loki mains are itching to tell me about Loki's multifaceted kit. It's just the invisibility, and it is so dumb. Being able to turn off the enemy's main sense is way too much. There must be some kind of drawback to such an incredible power, but there just fucking isn't one. At least Ivara has her mobility restricted, and she also cannot regenerate energy while in stealth. A shooter where the enemies cannot see you? Neat. Even DE must have realized this was a bit too far because they removed him as a starter after all. I thought Mac, Nux and Nova was the same character for the longest time. That has nothing to do with this, but I just thought I'd mention it. Anyways, Nova is certainly... oh, whoops. Max certainly has a unique playstyle with her bubbles, while also being a bit of a team player with her ulti, guaranteeing her team's shield back. Her bubbles though, they are like the epicenter of unintentional interactions. This is true for the void bubbles too, but because of their size, they are not as much of a problem. In order to play Mac to her full potential, you kind of need to know about some of these obscure game mechanics, and I'm not a fan. I cannot, however, ignore her unique gameplay she offers, which is a saving grace for her. I feel like the people who complain about Mesa being boring is the same people who complain about her being too fragile. If you're playing Mesa planted in one spot, you're doing it wrong, laddie. I don't think I need to explain myself here. The only 2 things you need to keep in mind is keeping up your defensive ability and getting out of pew pew mode before you get blown up. But I mean, I've gone out of my way to play Mesa before, just for the fun of it. And she has areas in which she is simply the best, such as the open worlds at lower levels as well as the index. I don't think she's majorly problematic for the game, and I think this is the kind of design you should aspire to. Alright, here we have the glass cannon, which just so happens to fire nukes. Mirage deals a ton of damage, especially with weapons, but she can also be used as an ability frame as a low budget option. I guess I don't have a lot to say. The abilities are visually distinct. I got nothing. I'm clearly not a Mirage enjoyer. Oh boy, another one. I am not massively impressed with Nekros. So here's the thing, conceptually Shield of Shadows is pretty cool, but ultimately it's just damage reduction. So we have a character with 90% damage reduction who can armor strip sometimes and may drop some additional loot. I feel like I've heard most of this before verbatim. Here is another example of a good design. All abilities in this Mayonnaise kit are worthwhile to use and no one ability overshadows the rest. His kit is loaded with useful stuff like damage reduction, damage vulnerability on enemies, and status immunity. The one thing holding back this Captain controversy is how non-congruent the kit is. It doesn't feel like it adheres to one theme, and thusly Nezha ends up being a jack of all trades but master of none. But yeah, Nidus, he needs stacks to be efficient, excluding him from a quick one of a mission, but also going to level cap, you'll need a lot of stacks just to not fall over. So he only works in this weird middle ground no one really cares about. The community Warframe. It's fitting that she has one of the most interesting kits in the game, with the slow dome, the projectile that you have to shoot to build up damage, which is a wholly unique mechanic, and of course the teleport. But Speedway is iconic for a reason as well. I still think her power is a bit on the weak side, and I have to dock a few points for that. She's a solid frame, but it kind of ends up being a scenario in which you play her just to play her, and not because there is any specific reason to do so, if not as a gimmick, specifically Speedway. I had to look up Nyx's abilities for this. I didn't remember because, well, she sucks. Her best ability is basically just Asher's Shuriken with his augment. Chaos is just a radiation AoE, which this is just awful. I present the grandpa of Warframe. Oberon is old. His kit worked for the game he was introduced into, but that game is no more. Warframe is a far cry from what it was in those yonder years. Nowadays, Oberon ends up having to do more to get the same results. For example, enemies must be standing on his lawn for his ulti to strip armor. Oh, Octavia, why must you exist? I do not know how anybody thought this was a good idea or why nobody stopped them, but I guess they just didn't. So Octavia has proportionately scaling damage that goes all the way to level cap, which is great. That's how it should be. But how does she acquire such power? Does she have a special stacking mechanic or something? No. Octavia has to press 1 on her keyboard every 30 seconds, and I feel like it goes without saying, but you don't give this ability to the character who has permanent invisibility. Did I mention that she has a massive weapon buff and that she can share her buffs with her teammates, including her invisibility? Also, she has an ability that turns off the enemy's AI. The fact that teabagging the corner is actually the most viable way to get to level cap is actually the stupidest thing they ever did. Protea is overpowered. I'm just gonna say it. She is also overpowered. But at least with Protea, you have to, I don't know, play the game to get the value out of her. With her turret, shield grenade, temporal do-over, and an entire energy fountain, she is filled to the brim with unique abilities that are all viable. She can be played both as a solo DPS nuke, as well as a team player, railjack captain, or even in the open world. She is extremely useful and distinct, and also, she's fun to play. I still don't have a lot to say about you, Rhino. Your damage buff is wholly unique, and I appreciate the scaling health tanking. More of that, please. So, it's like a meme that I don't like Revenant, one which I've been playing into. My YouTube persona, that of a hyperbolic asshole, makes it difficult for some to distinguish when I'm being dead serious and when I'm just memeing around. I don't really care about Revenant, just like I don't have any serious attachment to Warframe as a whole. Unlike Rio, you having fun with the game doesn't bother me at all. Good for you, dude. But I also wouldn't mind if the game went belly up tomorrow. One of the reasons why I'm so indifferent is the off-the-wall insane arsenal available to the player. Mesmer skin is the emblematic case of this power fatigue for me. You hit one button and spend 50 energy to ignore all damage, all status effects, and all crouch control for at least 30 seconds. Do you remember the old PS2 games that gave you an invincibility slider, after you beat the game? That's what Mesmer skin is, and you can share it with your team. I've heard quite a few people saying that I'm overstating it, or that it's not that good. I guess if your tiny brain takes 5 seconds to refresh, then maybe not. But you cannot convince me that a button that turns off all harmful effects for your entire team is not utterly ridiculous. I don't even think it's the strongest anymore. That goes to Styanics, but the ease of use is completely disproportionate to the reward. Crafting a build for a situation in which you needed to be able to craft this specific type of build to overcome this kind of challenge is always going to be more rewarding than crafting a build for something, in spite of the fact that you could simply have had Revenant turn off all of the harmful effects. Let's all agree that Citrine is perfectly balanced and that she would certainly not need a nerf. Now, other than that, she is indeed crazy overpowered. She's a nuke in lower levels with built-in armor strip, 2 elemental buffs, and a carpet viral debuff, and yet she's super fun to play. I'm gonna be completely honest, I am reading up on Sevagoth's abilities as I'm writing this. And if he is the only Warframe whose abilities I do not remember, then he didn't make an impact, didn't he? Minus Gloom, he's just so uninteresting. He is way too complex and doesn't have the power to back it up. Holy crap, it's too much. Go back. Styanics is in the running as the best Warframe in team play. Armor strip, infinite energy to your entire team with Nourish, and you already have the stats you would want to run Nourish anyways. And now you can spam your entire team with Overguard every time your ultimate hits something. It's too much, man. But at least it's still interactive. Now we're talking. Obviously her entire kit revolves around her Arcwing gimmick, but I think it's implemented well, so whatever. She does have her uses such as Diana's Pass or the Aura Worm boss fight, and of course everyone knows about relics. The only issue I have is that she is all single target, meaning that she is far below the curve in most content, which is, say it with me, about killing hordes of enemies. Once upon a time, when energy wasn't seeping out of the walls, Trinity had more of a role in the game. She is the typical support, she was my first Warframe crafted, and she was my first Prime Warframe as well, but she's kind of lame. If I have to think about it critically, all she does is shoot out healing and energy in an aura. Oh, and there's some damage reduction as well, I guess, which is good, very useful, but not super interesting. Great concept, but Valkyr's claws don't have the highest DPS in the game, and if you ever switch off them, you're gonna instantly get blown up. So you're just locking yourself into a subpar weapon. I also don't get her Berserker fantasy when playing her. The red tint around the edge of the screen, it's not doing it for me. Her claws don't feel very different from normal melee gloves. Can you believe this guy been getting a rework somewhat recently? He's still so weak. I don't care that Flesherorb has infinite damage, it is so finicky in an actual mission. The kicker, the thing I've not been able to get over, is the fact that another actual human, being dead serious, would argue that Warpen was not only viable but quite strong because he gets a 0.25 multiplier against impeded targets. Yeah right, my fault, he's clearly broken. I have Varuna in peak design. My mind cannot be changed. She has the best form of invisibility. Not the strongest, but the best. You wanna know why? Because she cannot attack without breaking stealth, as it should be. Everything else is ridiculous. She gets an appropriately strong buff when exiting stealth to make up for the difference. She has her sustain with her third ability with Equilibrium, and depending on your playstyle, you would focus on different abilities, meaning that she's not as straightforward as many other Warframes. She has one of the most active playstyles, in which you are safe as long as you play well, but if you make a mistake then you are severely punished, which is exactly as it should be. I think that you all expect Wisp to be in peak design, but while I agree that everything that is great about her is well and good, and I don't need to get into what they are, you all know what they are. In all seriousness though, she has some problems. Her second ability is entirely useless, or mostly so at least. Her fourth ability is mostly useless, or entirely actually. Her first ability is a set and forget, and so you're just left with the blind. That isn't even useful in some cases because things end up dying too quickly. And so you end up being an entirely passive onlooker, and that's not great. I think Wukong is a fine errand boy. I think he's really good at spy missions. I think the clone gimmick is kinda cute. I think you all need to get out of your bubble and experience other frames, because Wukong really doesn't have that much going for him. He's utterly inoffensive, by the way, and he does have some uses, but he's massively overvalued. I've come down on Sako a little bit too hard in the past. His kit is fairly unique and it can certainly get the job done, but the time of AFK Sako died with the Xmas changes. Sako have scaling damage and the ability to remove all of the enemy's defenses, but his darts mechanic is pretty useless most of the time. I find myself hiding in Tenno form more than I'd like, and his fragility is only one step up from Banshee, though he is much more lethal in a solo setting. In teams he actually offers quite a lot, and on closer inspection I think he's in a healthy place. You all convinced me. It's actually absurd just how many buffs Yareli has gotten over the years, and I mean major buffs and reworks, and she still just ends up being okay. Like 4 out of 10 I guess would be like C tier if we were ranking based on power. It's almost like creating a Warframe based around this stupid, should never even have been introduced in the first place, K-Drive. It's almost like 90% damage reduction isn't nearly enough. Honestly, I just want to give her a pass and leave her in questionable, because it is becoming quite obvious that she will never transcend this label. I have a problem with the way Zephyr's tornadoes are worded, but that's neither here nor there, nor is it an issue plaguing Zephyr in particular. She is very effective at camping, like wow, the tornadoes are slept on. They are damn strong. But trying to get through even a slightly narrow door frame is potentially death. And don't even get me started on the pipes on Zeta. All in all, I think she adheres to her design while remaining viable, but good God is she campy. Now go watch my latest video. I've never worked this hard on anything. Yes, it has some issues, but come on, it would mean a lot to me. Also, I faked a good number of the results in the Ultimate Aya Farming Guide. Okay, I needed to get that off my chest. Okay, bye.